Hey, folks, a lot of times we hear a lot of things about why people don't like to run divers is because sometimes they have some issues with running them, whether it's crossing the line or not understanding which side the diver is going to dive on. And maybe just when they deploy it, they come back and they fight the diver all the way in when they thought they should have tripped. Well, I want to give a few, maybe some tips that will help you while you're out on the boat, and be sure that you have your diver set properly. So when you get your diver, you get it out of the directional divers at that. When you get them out of the package, they're not often set up exactly the way you want it. So for an example, coming out of the package, it's often set at a zero setting, which is straight down. So what that means is at the zero setting, the keel weight that's on the diver, this is full of lead, will be angled straight down. So the diver will dive straight down like that. Okay. So when you turn this dial, and either to the right or to the left, it will add ballast to the diver and it'll cause it to tip. And when it tips over like that, the planing surface is now angled so that it pulls out to the side of the boat. Okay, so that's really the essence of our directional divers, is with that keel. So when you get it out of the package, it's on the zero setting. And by turning it, and you can turn it at variations all the way out to a 3.5 setting. So 3.5 is to its extreme distance over. And what that means is it tips out, tips more to the side at that angle, and then all the way out. So it's the shallowest running set that you would have at a certain amount of length of line. If you turn that dial, let's say to a 1.5 instead, which is about halfway, it would then be down on an angle more so like this, and be achieving a greater amount of depth. So you can imagine that, when you turn that dial, the greater the number, whether it be 3.5 at its furthest extent, would be shallower, versus closer to zero, or a 1 for an example, would be deeper. And that's really important, because now you have this understanding of where it's going to sit behind the boat, and have that ability to reset and get exactly to the depth that you're trying to target. Another thing that you want to do when you get your diver straight out of the package is make sure that the tension of this release is correct. So this is a large size diver. This is a 124 size diver. It's a mag diver, let's call it. And in that, it's often going to be pulling an extreme amount. It's a very large diver. You're going to need a very stout diver rod in order to be able to pull this. But on the same token, your release clip here at the very front of the diver needs to be set so that it's released at the proper tension. And you'll only know that by actually running it beside the boat. Now, on certain times of certain conditions, for an example, where let's say you have rough conditions, the rod might be jerking a whole lot more, and therefore will cause a lot of false releases if your release is set to a lighter setting. But at the same time, you may not want it to be too tight where it doesn't release, and you end up trying to release the diver and be able to pull in, let's say, a small fish. So it has a set screw on the release, and just depending on the model. So for an example, a Dipsy diver has a slot screwdriver that you'll need on the boat. If it's a deeper diver, it's a Phillips screwdriver, and you just place your Phillips screwdriver and obviously loosen it off. Lefty loosey, righty tighty. So when you set it, you want to make sure that you tested it before you put it in the water. Make sure that it's to the correct amount. This, as a matter of fact, just by feel, it's almost on the loose side. Okay, so when you're trolling slow, that might be quite good. Or if it's not rough out on the water, that might be quite good. But on any given day where, let's say, the conditions have changed, you want to go on a fast-paced troll, let's say 2.5 miles an hour, or if it's choppy, you may need to tighten that up just a slight amount. And each time that you're out, you may want to test it a little bit. Just put it in the water, run it back a little bit, and see if you can, trip that diver easily just by the flick of your wrist, basically, with the rod, and you'll be able to trip that diver. That's really important. I find more so that more lost fish are because either your diver has been set too tight and you're fighting the diver more so than the fish, or that it's too loose and it ends up tripping, and you're obviously resetting the line over and over again and reducing the amount of time being productive in your fishing. On top of that, you can buy things like, for an example, a rubber snubber. So rubber snubbers are often used for larger size, mag-sized divers, for an example, largely because they pull so much, okay, and they're pinned down there. The stress that the rod is already in place, the amount of strain on the line, and when you have a big salmon, for an example, that hits, a little bit of a shock absorption from the back side of the diver out to the lure is really important. You want a little bit of stretch there. So a snubber is very useful for that. Applications where you may not necessarily need a snubber would be, for an example, if you're running, let's say, a very heavy braided line, or sorry, fluorocarbon line as your leader. So if it's 50 or 60 pound fluorocarbon line to a flasher, you may not necessarily need a rubber snubber. And if you're walleye fishing, they just simply don't have the strength in order to bust your line all that easily. So you may not necessarily need your snubber while you're walleye fishing. The other part to a lot of the opportunities that come to be when you're setting these out in the water and not having these problems with your diver not necessarily diving properly and not able to trip those divers is when you actually deploy them. So you want to place them in the water beside the boat, and just with your reel that you're deploying that diver on the diver rod, just release the drag just slightly so that now it starts to click out slowly, okay? And then when you do that, then you have that opportunity to hear it going out nice and slowly and on constant tension. That's really important, because if you're just going to free spool that diver down, there's often this chance of it spinning around like this and going around itself, having the leader go around the main line, and in fact is actually impossible for you to trip that out. So you're going to fight the diver all the way up. Or if you have a big king that hits, it shreds the whole gear, all of your diver and all of the apparatus entirely off your rod, and you lose the whole works. So really important is that when you put this in the water, place it in nice on the drag setting that's nice and smooth. Lessen the drag so that it clicks out until you get to the right numbers that you want on your counter, and then tighten the drag up again, and then you're fishing. And then you know that it's been swimming all the way down nicely in a line and not spinning itself around and causing you issues and losing a lot more fish. I hope that these tips will help you while you're using divers, directional divers, and catch you a few more fish.